So for the last proper video of this year, and this is going up on my birthday, which is technically tomorrow for me, but today for you, we're going to do a tech tree tier list for the tier 10s. Now this is not going to be the same video as which tech tree would I grind. This is purely just going to be about the tier 10s that are currently in the game, in the tech tree, and which ones I like more than the others. I will make another which tech tree should you grind, and we're going to do that probably when I come back in the new year, but that takes a long time to do. So starting out with the 121, and I don't think people realize how good this tank actually is. It has a very, very nice standard pen, premium pen. It's got good TPM. It's actually very, very good, and people just gloss over this. The 121 is a pretty solid vehicle. It's not S tier, but I would definitely rather play a 121, something like a 140 or something like that. A WZ Lite, no, just no. I'm sorry, this thing, there's 0 point of it. It is so bad. The only good thing it is that it has is that it can ram stuff. It can ram stuff and it's slightly okay for the combat capacity. But why would you play this for combat capacity when a T100 LT exists, an RHM Panzerwagen exists? It doesn't make sense. This thing. I'm putting this as S tier because this tank I actually think is very, very, very good now. This thing got buffed and it is just beautiful to play. It has DPM, it has the armor. Although it doesn't have like insane armor, you can definitely still kill it. But the gun is amazing. You have 395 millimeters of heat pen, I think it is. And then 295 or 299, I can't remember which one it is, of AP pen. So you can choose. Either one works, even for free-to-play players. Like, it's fine. The exact same for the 121. Like, free-to-play players, people that don't want to fire as much gold as other people might, it's still a good tank. The 5A, I think, is going to sit in probably mid-tier for me personally. The thing is, some people put it at A tier and they prefer it over the 277. I don't. I don't even think the 277 is as good as it used to be, because the meta is slowly shifting away from being like that kind of tank to now being a little bit more of a higher alpha kind of meta. Which then leads us into the BZ75. And again, this tank, the thing is, it doesn't do anything exceptionally well. And it has 3 big old cupolas. But the gun has decent alpha. It has rockets. It's not completely useless. And I don't feel that it's doing itself justice if we put it into C tier. So I think that it's going to belong in B tier. In the middle of the pack. It's not great, but it's not terrible. In some circumstances, yes, it is terrible, right? You go hold down, you get penned, you die. But in other circumstances, it's fine. So I think it's kind of just middle of the pack. The TVP, again, I think that this is very middle of the pack. Some may put it into A tier. However, it has a very high skill cap, and I like it, but it can very quickly not be as fun because the standard shells are not that great. The premium shells are okay, but again, not amazing. It's got good mobility, it's got a good clip, but it just, the accuracy is a little bit off sometimes, and you can really feel it. So I think middle of the pack for the most part. I remember when this was like an S tier tank. When it first came out, this was like S tier, and now it's slowly gone down and down and down. And I mean, I do feel that you could put it in A tier, but I think for most people, it's going to be in mid tier. And even for me, I think that, yeah, this tank, I wouldn't want to rush out to play it. The VZ55, this is an easy A tier tank. It's no longer S tier because of the nerfs. However, the nerfs didn't really make too much of a dent into it. I think that the nerfs done really, really well, actually. Because they adjusted to how the tank should be played. It has a longer interclip reload now, which means that it's at 2.5 instead of 2, and you can't get the damage out as fast. I think that they've done a pretty good job with that. So A tier that is. EBR, S tier, it's still an EBR, it's still broken, it still has wheels that are indestructible, and it has enough view range that it could active scout and passive scout. So yeah, well done Wargaming, that's still OP. 50B, I think, is A tier. I can't put it any lower than this because once you know how to play this tank, it's amazing. I mean, the exact same thing, yes, you could say the TVP, but the at least a 50B has more health to actually counter you making a mistake. You make a mistake in the 50B, you can usually, have a little bit more health left over. Whereas with the TVP, you make a mistake in the TVP and you might just die instantly. Not to mention the better clip potential of the 50B. And yes, I know we're comparing a heavy tank with a medium tank, but heavy tanks are the meta, and the 50B is just better. The bat chat. I mean, this is going to be C tier, unfortunately. This thing needs a buff quite badly. I remember when they said they were going to buff this in their roadmap video, and it's just never happened. So I hope that at some point they will, because it definitely does need a buff. It might even go into poo for some people, but I feel like it does still have its potential, whereas the WZ doesn't. The M454. This is now middle of the road. It's not bad, but it's not good. Like, they nerfed it to the point where the gun's soft stats are now worse than they were when they were pre-buffed. And they basically just gave it... I mean, they even nerfed the mobility to now worse than it was before it got buffed in the first place. So the nerfs make no sense. And the nerfs and buff cycle that this tank went through was a complete roller coaster, up, down, up, down. It was everywhere. And I still don't think that this tank is where it should be. I think that they still need to make some adjustments to it, because this tank, it used to be the best tank in the entire game, right? During, what was it, 118 or 117? I can't remember which one it was that it got mega buffed. It was the best tank in the game. This thing was doing more average damage than Chieftains and stuff, and 279s and everything. This was the best tank in the game, for randoms anyway. And then it got nerfed and just nerfed again. I mean, even the AMX65T got nerfed, which was impressive. So yeah, I think that this tank, even though that it's middle of the pack, I think that this is in line with the BZ. So that's where I think it's going to be sitting. The 13105, I think that this is, again, just middle of the pack. It's an okay light tank. You can become a medium tank if you want to. It's a better bat chat, basically. It really is. This is just a better bat chat because it has one less shell in the clip, I believe. Or maybe it's even 2 less shells in the clip, actually. The bat chat has 5, and this has 3? Yes, this has 3 shells, and the bat chat has 5. So it sacrifices that for better reload time, obviously. And you're a light tank, so you can scout a lot easier than the bat chat. Yeah. Yeah, if you want the old bat chat, get a 13105. It's as close as you'll get to it. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have the clip, but there you go. Grille 15, middle of the pack, I don't care. I know I've had times where it's been in poo, I've had times where it's been in C, and now it's up here. It's fine. The problem with this tank is that once you get the full field mods, then it's fine. If you do not have the field mods, this tank is awful. Genuinely awful. If you do not have field mods, it's poo. It's as simple as that. But once you get the field mods, the tank is fine and it's middle of the pack. It's nothing more than this. Some would argue it maybe even should belong in C tier because of it, but I think it's just middle of the road. The RHM, this is actually A tier now, because since it got buffed, this has insane DPM. It's the best combat capacity light tank at tier 10. So, I mean, maybe the T100 could challenge it, but for the most part, this is the best. Because you even get 280 heat, which makes it better than the T100 LT. The only thing that it doesn't get more DPM than for the light tanks is the Sheridan. So this is actually second on DPM. However, the accuracy and the gun stats are much nicer on the RHM than they are on the Sheridan. Both have 280 heat, but I'd much rather be playing the RHM. The Panzer 7, C tier. I know, it's not a good tank, is it? I mean, we recently done a video on it. It's not great. It's below the average. You can't make it any higher than C tier, to be honest. Yeah, I would rather play a BZ75 because it's just better. Yeah, this tank is really needing a little bit of a buff. Even if they just tied it up around the gun mantlet, made it so that you couldn't pen the gun mantlet, it'd be a much better tank to play, and it'd probably buff it up to B tier instantly. The gun's good, but that's about it. The mouse. Where do we put the mouse? I think it's A tier. The reason being is that this tank, for certain scenarios, is insane. It's like S tier. But majority of the time, it's just going to be good. It's definitely not middle of the pack, but because of how slow it is, it can't do everything that you want it to do. And the massive, massive benefit that the mouse has is how much hit points it has. You can easily out-trade people with the mouse. A lot of people say that, yeah, it's just a big slab of hit points, and that's it. If you use those hit points and peek out 1-for-1 with different people, especially if they have like 390 alpha damage guns, and you're trading and hitting them for 490, you're coming out winning, because they will die long before you will. So you can trade your hit points really effectively in the mouse, and even bounce a lot of stuff. Side scraping, this is the best tank in the game. Easily. If you angle your turret, and then you side scrape, no one's penning you. So this is an easy A tier for me. Easily A tier. I wouldn't put it any lower than this. E100, B tier. Some would say that it's better than the mouse or in par with the mouse. However, overall, I'd probably rather play a mouse, at least recently, because it just has a little bit more hit points, and the gun, I don't really know what to say about the gun, because yes, the E100 does get a better gun with the small gun and the big gun. Like it's nicer to play with that gun than the mouse gun, but at the same time, I'd just rather play a mouse. Like the platform isn't as good as the mouse. I think that's the big thing. Yes, the E100 is faster, but the mouse can do things the E100 can't, especially in that certain scenario of getting in there and just being among the action and brawling. I'd rather be in a mouse. Jagdpanzer E100. I want to put it in S tier. I really, really want to put it in S tier, because I think that this tank is incredibly broken and completely busted. But we'll put it in A tier. I don't think that it's as good as the 1WZ, if we're looking at it objectively speaking. But the Jagdpanzer E100 is definitely, yeah, this thing will just wreck you. 420 heat, angle at 45 degrees, good luck pinning it, unless you have very, very good heat rounds. There's not a lot more to say. I've done everything in my tank guide on it. It's a good tank. E50M, B, I think it's a solid tank. It's probably no higher than B tier because it is just an average vehicle. And it's definitely no lower than B, because even though that, yes, it probably does need a little bit of a buff here and there, maybe give it a little bit more DPM, and it would still probably be in B tier even if it gave itself a little bit more DPM. But it's a good vehicle. Leo 1, I don't care what people say. This tank is an S tier vehicle. This is one of the best vehicles in the game. However, the skill cap on this tank is massive. If you want to get the most out of the Leo 1, you are going to have to be insanely good at the game, and you cannot put it anywhere else other than S tier. Some may say that other tanks are better. I cannot think in the way that you're meant to play a Leo, which is to be the mobile sniper that will move around the map, but you can still brawl with it if you know what you're doing. It's an easy S tier vehicle. Like if you could put HP, rammer, and vents and go and brawl in Himmels with it if you wanted to, because you can just trade, back off, keep someone permatracked, especially with all the DPM field mods, and you have every single, bond equipment and whatnot. If you max this thing out, you can do substantial damage, especially with its premium rounds. The premium rounds on this are insane. Like, I get that maybe it's a little bit of bias, but I do not see how anybody could say that Leo is bad. Dear God, I hope they don't nerf it, because it's one of the most played tanks in the game. Progetto 65, that is poo. I'm sorry, this is just genuinely awful. They keep nerfing it, I don't know why. Every now and again, we'll be just roaming around, sitting there waiting for an update, and then suddenly the update will come out. Oh yeah, we've added a new map. It's another 3-corridor map design, and you're all going to sit there, hold down, looking at each other. Very nice. And then they'll just randomly add in, we nerfed the Progetto 65 as well. Good. Please buff it. It didn't even need a nerf to start with. I don't know why they nerfed it in the first place. Nerfing it because the tank is too popular is dumb. The tank was fine. The tank was actually in a very, very good place. They already removed the auto reloader, the ability to have a rammer with the auto reloader. That's all they needed to do. The tank was fine. There was no other issues. And then they nerfed the bloom to the point where it is just awful. And you need stab. Some say you might even need IRM with it. I don't. I think that it's okay, you know, with just stab, but it's still not a good vehicle. Yes, you can still have good games with it, but it's nothing what it used to be. It's not up to par of other tanks as well. Rhino, listen, some of you, in my Rhino video, it feels like I attacked a third world country with the amount of people that were telling me how the Rhino was great. I don't care. It's a bad tank. Listen, you can love a turd, right? But you can polish it as much as you like. It's still a turd. Minotauro. The thing is, I want to put it in B because the gun is awful. I hate the gun so much, which makes it B tier. But the tank is like S tier if you look at it armor-wise. The thing is, I want this to be nerfed, and even if it got nerfed, it would still be B tier. The gun is not bad, right? With like pen-wise and stuff like that, but just it's just everything else about the tank, like with the gun and all that, is awful. And the fact that it has no cupolas, no weak spots, really. You just sit there, hold down. It's a boring tank to play and a bloody boring tank to play against. Yes, sure, it might be an S tier if you think about the armor, but as a complete package, it's probably B. Because even with all of the armor, it doesn't make up for that gun. It really doesn't. And I wish that they added weak spots. And that's the thing. Even if they removed the armor and made it so that, yeah, it was really strong, but it did have a cupola that you could actually hit while it was hold down, it would still be B tier because of the gun. STB. I know some people want to put this in A tier, but I don't like it. I don't like the siege mode. I hate the siege mode with a passion. I really, really don't like the siege mode. I also really don't like the armor of it. So combined, I don't think that it is any better than some of the other tanks. I would rather play like a CS63 than STB, to be completely honest with you. I'd rather play a 121, if I'm completely honest, than an STB one. But it's not an awful tank, it's just meh, it's mid for me. The Type 5, C tier. Now, you can trade health effectively in this vehicle, but it's not as good as the Mouse or the E100 to actually trade effectively, because you don't really have any way of angling your armor, you have no way of protecting yourself. Whatever angle that someone shoots you at, you can just get penned. So it's not like the E100 where you could turn your turret and then hide it. The Type 5 doesn't have that. The Type 5 is just going to get shot over and over again. And when you look at it compared to an E100 and a Mouse, there's no real contest. Ho-Re, that's going to be A tier. Even though that, yes, I can't really play as well as others that play this tank, I still like it. It's a very, very good tank. It's one of the best rounds in the game on the premium rounds, 360 AP. It's not quite as good as the 420 heat that's on the Jagdpanzer 100, but that 360 AP against a lot of vehicles is very nice. 60 TP, easy A tier for me. Some would probably put it in S tier, to be honest, but I'm just going to leave it in A tier for now. The only reason why I don't want to put it any higher is because of the pen. The pen is kind of low. Yes, it is a very, very good tank, but I don't think that it's the best of the best. Not an S-Conk. Yeah, for random battles, I think the 60 TP is A tier. The CS63, again, this one is A tier for me. This is a good tank. I don't think it's S tier. Yes, it is the fastest tank in the game. That is a medium. But the problem is with the gun. The gun is not accurate. And I don't really know how else to describe that to you. The tank doesn't want to work half the time. You could have a fully aimed shot and it will just miss. No matter what equipment you use or loadout you have, the CS gun will be a CS gun. One way or another at some point in your game. STRV, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's probably S tier. The thing is, this tank is mental. Like, actually mental. But I need to drop it down to A because overall, for most people, it's probably not S tier. The reason being is that this is the best sniper in the game. Once you go into siege mode and you get all the field mods, it is insane how good this tank is. You have 4,200 or 4,400 DPM or something ridiculous like that if you fully max it out. and 0.18 accuracy, I think it is, if you went for full field mods on aiming instead. This is an insanely good vehicle. Not fully, viable on every single map. Yes, you can brawl with it, but as soon as you see a tank that it can overmatch you, you just die. So it's only really viable against 120 caliber guns or 122 and lower. But it is really, really dumb that you have to have a certain caliber just to be able to pen it if it's hull down, or you get lucky and hit the cupola. I don't think any tank should be like that personally, and I think that they should actually remove any overmatch at all and make it just a sniper so it can't brawl, but that's just me. The Kran. The Kran is going to sit in mid tier now. It used to be S tier, but now it is mid tier, I believe. Especially after the nerfs, it was mainly the speed, sort of. I mean, the speed didn't really get changed though, if you think about it, because it never really reached its top speed unless it was down a hill. I don't know, the Kran, the nerfs definitely sorted itself out. I still feel that it's a very, very good tank. I wouldn't say anything more than B. I mean, it's still completely dumb on the ridgeline because it just points its gun up and that's it. Good luck penning it because you can't unless you're in a Yapanzi 100 or a Hori 3. The UDES. Listen, I know people are going to hate me for it. And I do not care. I hate the UDES 1516. I hate it more than the STB. I know that it's good in a hold down situation, but half the time, as soon as I get in a hold down situation, they're going to fire heat at me and hit my cupola and I'm dead. So it makes no difference whether or not I have a good turret or not, because as soon as you fire heat at this vehicle, especially in a hold down, it hits the cupola, it dies. It's an easy pen if they're firing heat. If they're firing APCR, it's a completely different story. But I hate the gun. The tank could be the most broken OP hold down thing in existence, but the gun on this vehicle is nearly impossible to deal with. It constantly wants to just flick up every now and again with the stupid siege mode mechanic that they have. The same as the STB. The shell velocity is only 1,000 and with APCR as standard. And so by the time they reach the target and you have 250 pen, make that with APCR, you're going to be looking about 240 pen, and then at like 500 meters, maybe like 220, 230, something like that. It's just not up to par for a tier 10 medium tank. The heat rounds are okay. Obviously, 310 heat is nice, but they're slow. The gun is derpy. I just don't like the platform, and I don't like the gun. The turret is nice, but the rest of the tank I hate. Manticore. Where am I going to put you? Because in some respects, it's an S-tiered vehicle, if you're looking at, a pure scouting role. But I think it goes into A tier, because it's not always going to have that role, always getting Prokorovka, right? Or always going to be able to sit in a bush. So I think that A tier it is. It's not as good as the EBR, obviously, but A tier, I think, is a solid position for the Manticore. The Concept 5, this is awful. Like, genuinely awful. I don't know what they're doing with this vehicle. It needs to be buffed. It needs to have something done to it, because at the moment, it's pretty useless. We actually have the old FV4202. I don't know why I added that into there, so we'll just ignore that. The FV4005, we'll put it into C tier. It's not poo because it's got the gun, but that's about it, to be completely honest with you. This gun is broken. It's OP. You shouldn't be allowed to do 1,700 damage. The exact same. You shouldn't be allowed to do over 1,000 damage with the Yapanzi 100. It's just so dumb that it exists. And so I can't really put it any more than this because it's not any more than C tier, let's be honest. It's funny every once in a while when it hits, but the tank itself is pretty awful. Centurion Action 10. It's going into A tier. The reason being is that it's not quite S tier for me, but overall, it's a very, very good tank. Like a really, really good tank. Ever since the buff, they've done a really good job of it. It's now got very good DPM, accuracy, mobility, armor is okay. Apart from if you're facing heat, then it can go straight for your little forehead thing. I wish my forehead was that small. The thing is with the Centurion, it's just a solid all-round vehicle as well. But it doesn't excel at like the Leo with the sniping. It doesn't excel at the EBR with just being broken and everything. And it doesn't excel like the WZ, where it just has that insane gun combined with armor, mobility, everything else. So the Centurion Action 10, I think, is a very, very good tank. Maybe slightly better than the CS63, but then the CS63 has the mobility advantage. And the S-Conk, obviously S tier. This tank is the best heavy tank in the game currently. If this was a tier 10 Clan Wars reward tank, it would have over 6k requirements. I'm pretty certain. You can put a turbo, HP turbo rammer is the go-to equipment on it, and you're then going around at 40 kilometers an hour. You have like 3.6k DPM, and you have like, 2,700 or 2,800 hit points, something like that. It's just an insane vehicle. Super reliable gun, reliable turret. Yes, it will still get penned in the turret ring underneath the gun, with around about 280 millimeters of pen. For the most part, nearly invulnerable hold down. That does mean that you will need to obviously fire premium at it if you want a pen, or you have high pen AP rounds like the Hori 3, Panzer 100. But at the same time, why would you fire standard rounds at an S-Conk when you could just go straight through them with either your 420 heat or, actually, yeah, I'd rather fire AP rounds at an S-Conk turret than heat rounds because of the heat shields. But 360 AP, S-Conk doesn't like that too much. Not a lot of tanks do. But yeah, this is the best heavy tank, secondary heavy tank in the game right now, hands down. The Badger, B tier, mid, doesn't do anything exceptional, has insane DPM, has very, very annoying armor. Again, it's just mid. It doesn't do anything outstandingly well. The Sheridan, I think it's a mid-tier light tank. It's not a bad light tank, but it's definitely not a good light tank. It's better than the WZ. Actually, no, I can't put that in the same tier as that, can I? So, although it does have the combat capacity. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I will put it in this same tier. Because it probably has roughly the same combat capacity as the AMX. And it does have, it's obviously got good view range, but it's an okay scout. So yeah, I'll leave it in B tier actually. M48 Patton, mid tier. They used to be trading blows with the Centurion. Not so much now. This tank is very mid in comparison to the Centurion. Yeah, the Centurion got buffed and that Patton left crying. M5Y, nope. It has a choice of guns which are all equally not great in one way or another. The turret is annoying. It also has these beams that go up to support the turret, which can be penned, which is just dumb. Like, they're just easy pens. Yeah, this tank is annoying to play. Many people thought that this was going to be completely OP, myself included. I looked at it and I thought, that is broken. And by the time that you get to play it, this tank is pretty awful. It is pretty bad. Obviously, the smaller gun is a little bit better, but that still doesn't make up for the platform it's on. T57 Heavy, A tier. Good tank. Very, very good tank. Best DPM of any heavy tank in the game. And, what's not to love about this tank? Honestly, yeah, ammo rack gets damaged a lot, but you can output, over 3k DPM in an autoloader. Easily on par with the 50B. It trades blows with the stuff that it can do. So, yeah, definitely an A-tier tank. E5, again, definitely an A-tier vehicle. This somewhat trade blows with the S-Conk, but doesn't obviously have the hold-down capacity that the S-Conk does. But in a brawling term, I'd probably rather play the E5 if I'm brawling than an S-Conk, because the hull armor and everything else about the tank is so much nicer, especially with 340 heat. It's really, really nice. Just as an overall package. The only thing that you need to worry about is obviously the cupola, which is big, but you can block it with your gun and obviously try and hide it as and when you can. The E5 is a very, very good tank. The E4 is poo. Like, I don't know why it still hasn't been buffed, if I'm completely honest with you, but that tank is very, very bad. The E3 is an easy A tier. I don't know what they're doing, to be honest. They nerfed it and it did nothing, because they nerfed every aspect that wasn't needed to be nerfed. You just nerf the cupola, please. Thanks. T100LT, A tier, good light tank. Not as good as the Manticore for pure scouting, but in a combat capacity, it is. So it's probably your best overall light tank. And the T100 is one that I would recommend people to go to actually learn the game, because it teaches you how to scout. Whereas the EBR definitely won't. And the Manticore, the gun, you can't really fire your gun on the Manticore line because you'll run out of ammo. K91, C tier. It has its opportunities and has its moment, but it's no higher than that. It's even a toss-up between putting it in poo. I think it's a very, very C tier tank. The 705A, mid tier. The thing is, it doesn't... If the 60 TP is in A, 705 is in B. There's no way that this tank is as good as the 60 TP. This tank compared to the 60 TP, I'd rather have the 60 TP gun. I'd rather have the 60 TP turret. I'd rather have the 60 TP just in every single way, apart from side scraping. And I think that is a good enough reason to put it in B rather than A. 430U, mid-tier tank. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's still fine. And it's definitely not a bad tank, but it's definitely not a good tank. 268V4, probably mid-tier after this. Yeah, after nerfs to it. It's not amazing anymore. It used to be amazing, but not as much anymore. This took the nerfs pretty hard, because it's nowhere close to being as fast as it used to be, but it's still fine. I think the nerfs did what it is meant to do, because there's no way that this thing should have been going that fast with everything else that it had going for it as well. So the nerfs worked and did well. 277, A tier, above the 5A for me. Yes, the meta is slowly moving towards a higher alpha kind of meta, and 490, as weird as this sounds, might not be as good or as wished upon as other tanks might have. I think that it's a very, very good tank still. It's got the speed, it's got the mobility. Yes, it doesn't have as much DPM or gun depression, but the turret is 10 times better than the 5A's turret. Million times. Even the hull armor, so much better than the 5A. I'd rather play the 277. ST2, A tier again, since the buffs, very solid vehicle. Yes, you can still pen it in the cupola, but overall, very, very nice tank now. Kind of like, almost like an E5 in many respects, where you're going to just have to hide your cupola to be able to get the most out of this vehicle. IS7, mid. It's just a mid-tier tank. It's not as good as it used to be. And with each passing update, 303 APCR pen. With tanks getting more and more armor, it seems, 303 APCR is not enough. So I think it's mid-tier. You can definitely have good games in it. I mean, I can't put it any higher than the 5A. I think that the 5A, because of the way that you play the i7 is different from the 5A, the way that you should play them, yeah, I think that it's in line with the 5A rather than a 277. Obviously, they play differently. I'm not saying that this is the same as a 277 or the same as a 5A. I'm saying, like, with this ranking-wise. The 268, C tier, this does nothing. Like, I'm sorry, is it meant to be a sniper? Is it meant to be a brawler? Or what's it meant to be? It might have good heat rounds. This is the difference, right? This tank, the same heat rounds as this tank. But it's all the way down here. This has nothing that is exceptional about it, and yes, fine, you can have good games in it, but it's not as good as, like, I'd rather play a Grille or a V4 than the 268, because it doesn't offer anything that these two couldn't give me. IS4, A tier, good tank. It's just a solid vehicle, it really is. This tank is... The only problem with it is that it doesn't get enough shells, and the gun can be a little bit derpy. But besides that, it's a good vehicle. You can side scrape well, probably even side scrape better than the 705A, and it's definitely better, I would say, overall than the 705A. You get a 340 heat, you get decent enough standard rounds. Again, the only problem, it runs out of ammo very fast. Definitely keep it in the same tier as the 60 TP though, because these two, even though the 60 TP has a much bigger gun, they play very similar in certain aspects. And the 140... I mean, it's not as bad as a Concept 5, and probably not as bad as a UDES because I don't like the UDES siege mode, but it's not a good tank. It's very, very dodgy. Like, you get set on fire all the time, it has 320 alpha, you can't even perma-track people anymore because of hardening, it doesn't have the loads going for it. You can't put it in mid-tier because, like, it's not better than an STB. So that is where I think everything sits in the tech tree. Let me know your thoughts down below. Again, it's probably going to be very great in the comments section discussing this, but thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.